Welcome to Mineral Talks Live, the monthly live mineral webinar that brings you in-depth and in-person interviews with mineral people from around the world. Mineral Talks Live is brought to you by a joint effort among the Mineralogical and Geological Museum at Harvard University, the SMMP, and Blue Cap Productions. Tune in on the first Wednesday of every month and stay connected to your mineral world. Now, broadcasting live from beautiful Honolulu, Hawaii, the land of aloha, ukuleles, and shakas, this is Mineral Talks Live. Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Swoboda, and I want to welcome you all to another fantastic episode of Mineral Talks Live. Today is Wednesday, October 4th, and this is our 79th episode of the greatest mineral talk show on the internet. For those of you tuning in for the first time, Mineral Talks Live is a monthly talk show that's filmed live on the first Wednesday of every month. I'm the host of the show, but I'm certainly not the only one making the show happen. My two outstanding and equal partners, Dr. Raquel Alonso Perez and Dr. Eloise Gayu, complete our volunteer staff that makes up the Mineral Talks Live team. Every month, we talk with some of the best curatrix, curators, collectors, dealers, miners, researchers, artists, and media people in the mineral world. And I'm proud to say that we are a majority female-owned endeavor in the mineral collecting community, which is actually pretty rare. If you happen to have missed any of our past interviews, there's a complete list of all those episodes, along with links to those interviews at the URL located at the bottom of the screen. Now, one of the things that makes this program unique is that not only is this a live show, but it's a show where you get to interact with our guests. All you have to do is participate through the chat or the Q&A features, both of which are located at the bottom of your Zoom window. The chat feature allows you to type messages to everyone watching the live show. We encourage you to post your thoughts, comments, or questions about what we're discussing in this chat area while we're talking. Hey, even go ahead and fire off a hello to everyone when you log on and let us know where you're tuning in from, because we love to see what kind of reach we're getting. I'm based in Honolulu, Hawaii, while Raquel is out of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Eloise is normally streaming to you live from Paris, France. So just with us, we've covered the entire width of the United States and Europe. Unfortunately, today, Eloise isn't able to join us. So let us know where you're from. Let's make sure Europe is covered, and let's see how much further we've reached. While our guests and I generally don't see your message during our conversation, throughout the show, Raquel will be monitoring the chat area and will be very active there. Occasionally, she may even interject a question or comment to us during the interview, so don't be shy if you have a question. If your question is a little bit more general, go ahead and utilize the Q&A features, and we'll get to those questions at the end of the show. Finally, towards the end of the program, you'll see a window pop up on your screen. This is our quick fire 5 questions segment to see how well all of us know our guests. This is just a fun way to get a little more personal with our guests. So go ahead, play along, and you may even find a nice way to include yourself in a conversation the next time you see our guests at a show. Now, speaking of inclusions, we have got for you today a real treat. We've been going back and forth with this guest, trying to get him on our show, but our schedules just haven't synced up until now. Coming to you live from the Golden State of California, he's the big man you turn to when you're going real small, a man that straddles the fence between mineralogy and gemology, the master of inclusions himself, Mr. John Koivula. John, how are you doing today?
Great. How are you?
I am fantastic. How's the weather out there in California today?
It's clear, and it's going to be a warm day, I think.
Well, terrific. Hopefully you will stay cool today. I'm really glad that we can finally get our schedules synced so that you could be on the show.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Terrific. Now, John, I start off each interview with a question I absolutely love to ask. I know you first became interested in minerals when you were 5 years old. What was the mineral that caught your attention, and what were the circumstances behind it coming into your life?
Well, that goes all the way back to my father. He was a mining engineer, and he worked for Anaconda Copper in Montana. And as a sideline, he would go and look at properties which had been abandoned and there wasn't enough economic value to them to pursue by a big mining company. He'd check them out and see what they were like. Well, he had a couple of claims going, and because the way they do claims, you have to do a yearly assessment and work and show proven work on your claim in order to keep it. So he had a couple of these places in Montana, and we would go there as our summer vacation, go across the Idaho Panhandle and into Montana. And he worked and did his improvements on his claims. We would sit there and collect the mine dump. And the mine dump had secondary copper minerals in it, things like azurite, malachite, and chrysocolla. And that's what fascinated me, was the blue colors and the green colors that this mine dump material would have. And I used to collect it, the best pieces that I could find, and put them in the trunk of the car and take them home and actually sell them. I put them in a wagon.
A mineral dealer in the early days,
right? And I think people bought them because I think they just thought I was kind of pathetic, going around with a wagon full of rocks, selling them off. But to me, they were really pretty, and so that was the first exposure to minerals. Really, was secondary copper minerals.
Fantastic. Now, did your dad ever give you minerals for your birthday?
Yes, he did. Both he and my mother would find something interesting in a pawn shop, or there was a little mineral store in downtown Spokane that I later worked with the guy, but he would go and pick out something that he thought would interest me and something that would have a little story behind it and bring it home and give it to me. So I had a regular little collection going.
Oh, that is a fantastic birthday gift. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but today is your birthday as well.
Yes. October.
Well, happy birthday, John.
October 4th, 1949.
1949, October 4th. I love it. I'm an October birthday boy myself. So, yeah, man. Way to go, October. Hey, John, I like to call you the master of inclusions because, well, you are. So at some time after the age of 5, you went from being interested in minerals and collecting and kind of building up your little collection there to being focused on inclusions. How old were you when that started, and how did that start?
Well, that goes all the way back to when I was 12 years old.
Okay.
For a few years, I was involved with we had people living across the street from us, but I was involved with the Rock Rollers Mineral and Gem Club in downtown Spokane. And so I was like a junior member of it. And they would always have interesting field trips. So I was on a field trip with them at the age of 12 and came across hanging off the edge of a drop, a cliff. I found a quartz crystal that it was broken on the base and broken at the termination. So it wasn't a good crystal. But inside of it, and it was completely clear, inside of it was this little pyrite crystal. And I looked at that and I thought that was very magical. I'd seen fluid inclusions in the past before, but they didn't grab me the way this one little pyrite floating inside of this crystal grabbed me. And from then on, I started looking at minerals in a different way, looking at them as houses for inclusions and see what they might have picked up during their growth cycle.
So you're 12 years old, that's still rather young, and you have already been collecting minerals, but now you start finding inclusions. And
right.
Was there something about this particular inclusion that interested you? I mean, I'm trying to kind of unwrap the story of, what ultimately becomes a major thing for both the gemological and the mineralogical world. But when did you start kind of really delving in to investigate what that would be, what the inclusions would be?
Well, it was just looking at that particular piece. What you could do is you could rotate it in your hand and watched the inclusion from different angles. And I liked the fact that you could see the mineral from all different positions, and it was perfectly formed all the way around. So it was a little floater crystal that had been trapped inside of this quartz. And that got me, that really did, like I said, it got me going in this. And then I started looking at the minerals that I had at home to see if they had any interesting inclusions in them. And I decided that I liked this so much that I wanted to collect pieces that had inclusions. And so that's where I got the start on that.
Okay. So then years go by and it's time to go to college, and you've decided that you're going to go for a science degree, and you actually had a double major in chemistry and geology that you had completed in a 4-year term. What was the process whereby you had these inclusions in the minerals that you found fascinating, to where you decide this is something I want to study in college, with the assumption that this was a career path that you wanted to take?
Well, I knew I wanted to be involved in mineralogy, and for several years, I knew I wanted to be involved in the mineral world.
Okay.
But it really took off for me when, and it kind of, in a way, shifted my life a little bit. When I was at the age of 18, my future mother-in-law, who became my mother-in-law, but my future mother-in-law told me that she had taken some jewelry that she had in to be worked on, and it needed to be done right away. So she took it into the store where she bought it, and they said they couldn't do it right away. But because she was a good customer, they sent her to a man by the name of Leon Agee at a place called the Gem Shop. And she went in there, and then later she got her jewelry repaired, but she later told me that I should meet this guy because he's really interesting. And so I went to the place. I took her at her word, and I went into the place, and there was nobody inside the store, but there was a bell. And then he came up the stairs, and I found out by talking to him that he mined his own minerals, his sapphires from Montana, star garnets from Idaho, quartz crystals from Washington State. He mined his own little collections and cut stones out of them. So he was a lapidary, and then would put them in jewelry and sell them. So he was like a one-stop shopping center for gem materials. But I started showing him. I came back several times and started bringing in specimens and showing them to him, the stuff I had. And he'd show me his gemstones and crystals and things like that too. But he told me, he says that one of the things I should do is study gemology. He said, because everything you're showing me is pretty much is a gemstone, a gem material. And so I looked into, because he was a fellow of the Gemological Association of Great Britain, and also of the GIA, graduate gemologist. He gave me the addresses of these places, and I looked into them. And so I did the same thing he did. I took the courses while I was going to college, and ended up as a graduate gemologist and also a fellow of the Gemological Association of Great Britain. And
excuse me, but that's Gem A for everybody else who isn't familiar with it. And we've had Alan Hart on the show. So I'm sorry, please continue. So you've got your GG.
Yeah, so I got those 2 degrees. And then proceeded to I got myself a job. I was working for Kamenko, but I got myself a job. Kamenko ended up being mostly on weekends and Mondays and Fridays, but I got myself another job working at a jewelry store. And I thought that was interesting because I found out I wasn't a salesman. That was one of the things I could not do. I couldn't sell anything. Right. You know, some people can sit there and take something that they paid $20 for and sell it for $300.
Sure.
Yeah. I can't do anything like that. I just wasn't in me to do it. so I failed miserably at being a jewelry vendor. But one of the things that happened then when I was working at the store is I decided, well, I'm going to send in my resume to GIA because they offered at the time a placement service that they'd help you find a job. So I sent in my resume. I made my resume up and sent it in to GIA asking for help in finding a job if they could find me something to do. And I got a letter back saying that they wanted to hire me. So
and that was a letter from Richard Litico at the time.
Richard Litico, yeah, saying that they wanted to hire me. So and he told me to be down in Santa Monica, be down in Santa Monica, California in October, the first part of October, so that I could start working for him. So I took him at his word, and we packed up our stuff and headed on down to California. And the first thing that I noticed was palm trees. I'd never seen a palm tree except in pictures, and they looked so prehistoric to me.
Yeah.
The palm trees made it look like there should be some big dinosaurs walking around. But
the Jurassic Park music.
Yeah, but we got down to Santa Monica, and we found ourselves, we didn't have a place to stay, so we stayed in a little motel until we could find a apartment to rent. So we found a little apartment, we rented it, and then I was going to go in 2 days after my birthday on October 6th. I was going to go into GIA and start work. So I went there. I was all dressed up in a suit and everything like that, and I went there and told the receptionist at the front desk that I was there to start work in the laboratory. And she said, just a minute, and she picked up the phone and called into the lab, I guess. And then a man by the name of Chuck Fryer came out, and he looked at me and then looked over at her and then looked at me again. He said, I said, I'm starting in the lab today. I've been told to report to work here in the lab. And he said, that's news to me. And so he said, wait here. And he told me to go sit on a bench. And he says, wait here and I'll be back. So he went upstairs. And he was gone about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that, and came back down and didn't even look at me. He said, all he said was, follow me. And I went into the lab, and that's when I started work at GIA. And I've been there for 45 years. So it's a long time.
I love it. I hope he warmed up to you over time.
Oh, yeah, we became good friends.
Good. So now what work were you doing in the lab? Because you weren't, or maybe you were. Were you doing photo micrography right away? Or...
Yeah, actually, I was doing photomicrography right away because we had what we did was we took photographs of material, little gemstones and some of the jewelry and so forth that we were reporting on, and we would put these in our magazine, Gems and Gemology, our quarterly journal. And it was a small format at that time, and they used black and white photographs. And so what we would do is we would use a Polaroid camera and get an instant picture out, and that was what was used in the magazine.
Oh my God.
But yeah, that was a long time ago. And so I was sitting there doing that, but I brought in a 35 millimeter camera, a little one that I had, and that worked well too. But the problem with that is it didn't give you instant gratification the way cameras do today. You know, they'll show you right away what you've got. Right. But no, I was doing photomicrography right away. It was a skill that I had, and I told Chuck about it. So he said, you know, he'd bring something to me and say, could you take a picture of this? And I'd take a picture of it, and we put it in the magazine. So from the start, I was doing photomicrography, but also doing gem identifications, where somebody would send in an unknown and they would want to know what it was. So we would do, is it natural? Is it synthetic? Has it been anything been done to it to doctor it up, and what it was? And then I also did pearl X-raying, where we put a strand of pearls into an X-ray bath, put some toner over the top of it to even out the thicknesses of the pearls, run a X-ray generator with a film in the bottom underneath the pearl strand, and we get a radiographic picture out that we could look at the interior of the pearls and decide whether they were cultured or natural.
Interesting. Very cool.
And then
that actually brings up, I'm going to use that as a segue to share another commonality that you and I have that I don't even know if you're aware of this. I think you'll remember it once I show you. So, speaking of pearls, here is a cover of a Gems and Gemology magazine.
Right.
This was from fall of 1989. And this was a beautiful photograph taken by Harold and Erica Van Pelt. And for those of you not familiar with the Van Pelts, they were the name in any kind of mineral photography at this time in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so, John, I want to share this with you because in this issue, there was an article on this new emerald deposit in Minas Gerais, Brazil, written by David Epstein. And in this article, here's another photo by Harold and Erica Van Pelt of some of the emeralds from the area. But what I was always loved this issue for was some of these locational photographs. And if you look, that photograph right there was taken by me. And down here, we have a photograph by Gerhard Becker, who was very famous at the time. Go to the next page, and a couple more photographs taken by me. I was down there with my father and was able to take those photographs and use that in the article. Here on the next page, there's a photograph by our friend Robert Weldon, and those are some emeralds that were provided to Robert by my father. And lo and behold, this is the last set of photos in the article taken by John Koivula. So you didn't know this, but you and I shared photo credits along with the Van Pelts and with Robert Weldon in a Gems and Gemology magazine. And that was one of my proudest moments, like right after I got out of, actually, I was still in college when that happened.
Yeah.
So then, John, about a decade after you joined GIA, you were able to publish a series of books with one of your heavy early influences, Dr. Edward Gübelin. Tell us about what that was like and how the world reacted to the Photo Atlas of Inclusions and Gemstones, volume 1 to 3.
Well, that sort of started again when I was just a little over the age of 12. I was taking some photomicrographs. They weren't very good. The equipment wasn't great. And I'd sent him some of the photographs to look at and to critique. And he wrote me back a very nice letter, but he sort of chastised me in that my efforts weren't that good. He said that they needed a lot of work. And I figured, he had a really nice microscope and I didn't at the time. And I figured, well, I'd eventually be able to maybe get some good equipment. And so we started corresponding at that time. And I just wrote him back and thanked him for looking at my photos. And he wrote me back and so forth, back and forth. And so I decided I started getting really good at photomicrography, and I decided I wanted to do a book. So I did
and I've just brought up a photo of you and Dr. Gübelin here.
Right. I see that. Rottenham Hall. That was his house in Megan.
Okay.
And that was all made out of that sign there was all made out of minerals, slabs of minerals fitted together.
Super. Oh, I
But
thought that was just a printed sign.
no, it's set into the wall. It was a bunch of stone.
Oh, fantastic.
But anyway, we corresponded back and forth, and I told him I was wanting to do a book, and I was working on a manuscript. And so when he came to GIA, he came to the United States and came to visit us in the laboratory. Uh, he was brought downstairs by Mr. Lidicote, and he said he wanted to meet me. So we got to shake hands and meet in person for the first time. And I told him, I said, I have a manuscript for a book that I've been trying to farm around. GIA had turned down. They weren't interested at the time in doing it. They were working on another book project called Diamonds from Birth to Eternity. So they weren't interested in another inclusion book. But I still had the manuscript that I'd done and a bunch of photographs. And I told him, I said, I can't find a publisher anywhere that's interested in doing this. And he said, well, he said, I've been thinking about doing another book. And he said, and I have a publisher. He says, you got a manuscript. I have a publisher. He says, we can go through your manuscript and I can add some material to it. And he says, I've got photomicrographs and you've got photomicrographs. We should be able to come up with a nice book. So he turned to Mr. Lidicote and he said, John and I are going to do a book together. What do you think about that, Dick? And Mr. Lidicote said, great, that he'd be looking forward to it. So that's when the first book got kicked off, was there. And from then on, our correspondence, yeah, that's the first volume right there of the Photo Atlas. And from then on, that's what we worked on. And there's the second volume. That was in 2005. And then the third volume was in 2008. And that's volume 3. And they're voluminous books with a lot of color photomicrographs in there showing the inclusions in various things. Like that one there is a sapphire or a garnet in a sapphire. That one right there is garnets and sapphire. And we had, so we worked on that first book and got it done. And he had the publisher, like he said. So we were off to the races.
I mean, that is fantastic. And John, I have here a copy of a book called The Edward Joseph Gübelin Story.
Yes.
And I'm going to read to you a section from this book in reference to the Photo Atlas. Here on page 161, it's written, after 40 years of extensive research work, his personal photo collection comprised more than 10,000 documentary photomicrographs. In 1979, at a meeting with the famous inclusion researcher John Koivula, Edward Joseph hatched the plan to compile an encyclopedia and make the photographic material accessible to all interested amateurs. And then it goes on to say, it was published in 4 editions until 2004, and from 1991 was available in English, German, and Chinese. The first volume was complemented by a second in 2005 and a third in 2006, which dealt with topics such as new potential provinces, synthetics, and treatment methods. And then there's a quote I'd like to read to you that Gübelin said. I am most proud of the Photo Atlas, which I co-authored with John Koivula. I would call it the crown of my work of investigation of inclusions in gemstones. You're the man. Yeah. You are the man, my friend. Hey, well, have you been or have you heard about the new Gübelin Museum that they just opened in Lucerne, Switzerland?
We heard about it and looked at some of the photographs that they were going to hang in there, but we haven't been there. We haven't seen it.
I went to the soft opening right after the Sainte Marie show this summer, and it is definitely worth you checking out. I think you'll really enjoy that.
Yeah, I'm sure I would. anything to do with inclusions.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I walk around gem and mineral shows, and I like to look at the cases that people put up from their collections, but I look at the inclusions in some of these things sometime, and I wonder if the people who own the crystals, like beryl crystals, for instance, or tourmalines, if they ever are fascinated and look at the inclusions and wonder what they are.
That's a good question. I think too often people are focused on the overall, and so they hold it out at hands with, and they would notice the inclusions if there was something obviously remarkable about it, but just the fact that it exists may not be of enough interest to them. But correct me if I'm wrong, your studies have found that the inclusions actually kind of create a fingerprint in the minerals and gemstones to give you a better idea of the origins or the geological actions that created the specimen. Is that accurate?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Mineral a lot of mineral collectors want some matrix with their specimen. They want a little bit of matrix on there because it explains the geology. Mm-hmm. Well, there's no more intimate setup than there is an inclusion inside of a crystal, because this is the crystal then becomes a showcase for the inclusion, and you have if you can identify the inclusion, you have a big piece of the puzzle on how this specimen formed, how the mineral itself formed.
Very interesting. I wonder, there might be an interest in some kind of program where we look at a specimen even on matrix, and this would actually be a really neat idea. So we look at a mineral specimen on matrix, and we suss out as much information as we can based on what we could see. And then we go and we do a deep dive analysis of the inclusions and see how much more information can be added to that based on the study of the inclusions. That'd be kind of cool, don't you think?
Yeah, it would be a lot of fun to do. It would be a good project.
All right, John, maybe it's something that we do in Tucson. Hey, John, I'm going to go through some of these photographs that you sent me, because this really touches on a lot of the things that were important in your life and kind of help illustrate lots of parts of the story that you just told. So I'm going to start with this one. I believe this is, well, I actually have no idea. Tell me about this photo.
This is underground in Butte, Montana. My father, who's on the right-hand side, standing there by himself, was a mining engineer working for Anaconda Copper, and that's one of the tunnels underground. And so that shows that this was back in the 1930s, the mid 1930s.
Okay. Wow.
So that was a long time ago, and it shows that. I guess sort of mining and minerals and so forth were in my blood early on.
Man, it certainly was. It was almost like it was inevitable that you went down this route, although I guess most people couldn't have predicted that it would have been inclusions. Here's a photo of
that's me.
A guy who looks like he just got off his motorbike, hammering into the wall.
That's me when I was young and I was doing field collecting. I loved to go out field collecting when I was young, not so much anymore. It kind of, my knees bother me, my lower back hurts and all that kind of stuff. But that just shows me I actually had some hair, and I was pounding on a little pegmatite. We were actually looking for fluorite at the Felix fluorite mine. So that just shows me that I had been involved for quite a while, because I don't look like that anymore.
Well, now, John, be honest with me. After you would find something looking like this, would you take that, look at the mountain, and in your best Elvis voice say, Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, I would actually. No, I was looking for the friend that I was there with, the guy by the name of Mike Halfstead. He was looking for the fluorites. I was looking for fluorites with galena crystals in them, and I found some.
Wow. Okay. So this was well after that 12-year-old mark where you first started getting interested in inclusion. So it was
Yeah.
obviously a passion that has followed you or that you have followed your entire life.
Yep.
Now, this is you at GIA.
Yeah, this was the fledgling microscope laboratory, which was also a part of my office.
Now, what year would you say this was?
This was probably, oh geez, that would have been probably 1986 or 87.
Okay, because I was going to say that, my father was a big fan of yours. When I was doing the photography, he always said to me, Brian, you've got to come, you've got to meet John Koivula. And he actually, I don't think you remember, but he brought me to GIA one time and he introduced me to you in the lab. And this is more how I remember you from my youth. And I was honestly, I was so shy and intimidated that I probably just mumbled something like, oh, very nice to meet you, sir. That was it. But yeah, he was a big, big fan of yours.
Yeah, well, I was a fan of your dad too. Oh, this one right here. This is the pyrite crystal that I found in the quartz from Washington State when I was 12 years old.
Oh, this was the quartz with the broken base and the broken tip.
Right. And actually what happened to it, you can see in the background, there's a kind of a line, couple of lines running through. Those are facet junctions because my friend Leon took the crystal from me and said he was going to cut a stone out of it. And he cut I think it was 12 point some carat pyrite crystal included in a 12 point some carat emerald cut stone. So that's in a faceted stone there.
And John, I'm going to make the assumption that you still have this because this doesn't seem like a photograph that was from a scan. It seems like it's more recent.
Yeah, no, I have this in my collection, but Nathan's the one who took the picture.
All right,
we're going to microscope that he has in his office. He took the picture.
Super. We're going to get to Nathan in a little bit and introduce him to everybody, but let's go on here.
Now, this was my friend Leon Agee, the one who
got the man who cut that quartz. Yeah.
Right. And he was working on an inclusion specimen here at his Ultratech faceting machine. And he would take scraps and things from me and beat up crystals and turn them into gemstones with inclusions in them. And he cut more than 1,000 pieces for me.
Now, if this is where he cut the stones, I am thoroughly impressed because that is the cleanest cutting station I have ever seen in my life.
Oh, he kept everything scrupulously clean.
Wow.
He took notes on every stone he was working on, and he kept everything just really clean. He'd clean all the laps after he used them and all that and keep them filed. He filed them in that cabinet you see there to the right.
Super. Okay, so I'm assuming that these are some of the stones that he cut.
No, this one actually was Jason Dubrava cut this stone right here. And this has a pyrite crystal inside of a rhodolite garnet. But I just thought that was a very pretty picture.
And what's the locality of this stone?
Probably. Yeah, we don't really know for sure, but probably Tanzania.
Wow. Superb. And then tell us about this one.
This one is from Brazil and it's a topaz. It's about 70 some carats. I can't remember exactly, but the yellow crystal that you see in there, the orangish yellow one, is monazite. And the The colorful halo around it is the decrepitation halo because the monazite had a different coefficient of volumetric expansion than the topaz did, and so that's the stress crack that was created. But it ended up making a really nice inclusion scene.
This is beautiful. Who cut this one?
That one was cut by somebody in Brazil. I don't know. I bought it as a cut stone, and I got it from Luciana Barbosa.
Right on. Okay, here we have.
Yeah, that's a study block. That's called a study block.
Okay.
And I believe this one was cut by Nathan. I'm not sure, but it's shows garnets. There's 3 big garnets in there. This is fairly good size too. It's about 1.5 inches. So that's big for an inclusion specimen.
That is super. And then this has me kind of scratching my head.
Yeah, it had a number of people scratching their heads. It's a cylinder of quartz, of rock crystal, with 3 pyrite crystals lined up perfectly inside of it, right down through the middle. The way it was cut, they're right down through the middle, and so you can sit there and rotate it, and you can see all the different faces of the pyrite crystals inside of the cylinder. But I've had people think that this is plastic.
Well, I mean, that was my natural assumption the first time I saw it. I thought it was epoxy.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not. It's actually quartz. And it's from Brazil. But that's been a fun one to show people.
That's great. And you still have this in your collection?
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I've got about 2,500 or 2,600 specimens in the collection.
Of just included minerals.
Yes.
So, oh my God. That's a film into and of itself.
And then this is what we call graphic garnet. It's spessartine garnet and quartz grown together.
No way.
In a pegmatite, and you've heard of graphic granite
right
before, with the black and the colorless quartz and so forth. Well, this is rock crystal quartz and spessartine garnet forming in that graphic pattern. And that thing is about 80 carats. It's big. It's a big flat sort of piece. It's got rounded edges, but it's mainly flat. And I sometimes wonder, I ask people, which one's the inclusion? Is it the quartz or is it the spessartine? Because they're both in equal portions, it seems to me.
That raises some really interesting ideas there. It's almost kind of a chicken or egg situation where you can debate it endlessly, but in the end, there's really almost no answer.
Yeah. And this one here was a photograph by Robert Weldon.
Yeah. And one of these days, we got to get Robert on the show. Okay. So this is you in the GIA lab. Explain to us some of the equipment that we're looking at here. This is a little bit more advanced than the microscope you had when you first met Gübelin, I'm guessing.
Yeah. This is actually a workhorse instrument. It's made by Nikon. And it's a stereo zoom system. The camera's mounted on it. And this is the one that Nathan uses to get his photomicrographs. And it has stacking hardware or software built into it. So he can stack the images and get a complete focus all the way through the specimen that he's looking at. So it's a Nikon, it's basically a research grade microscope. But it works fantastically on inclusions. It's sort of a lifesaver at times.
Well, John, let me ask you a couple geek out questions here. What kind of megapixels are we talking about with the camera here?
16.
16. Okay. So, compared to modern mirrorless cameras, that's quite low, but they certainly can't do what's going on here. Now, does the camera output JPEGs or RAWs or a combination? What does it do?
Raw files.
Raw
It
files.
can do JPEGs too, but it's primarily raw files, and then we can do whatever we want with those.
Sure. So for the people unfamiliar, raw file is basically a direct recording of what the sensor detects in terms of subjects, and it allows you to actually, the raw files almost requires you to do some post-production processing. It gives you a higher range of exposure in terms of lights to darks, and it basically is independent of light color and any kind of tint aberration that may get in there. So it's really the most accurate and reliable way to take a photograph of anything, really. Okay, so now
Because all the information is contained in the photograph. You just have to bring it out.
that's correct. That's correct. And so, John, you have on the screen there a extreme close up of something that is on the stage. What are we looking at on the screen?
That's actually amber.
Oh,
It's a
wow.
piece of amber, and it has a mite in it with very long appendages. So
It has a what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
it's a mite,
A
like a
mite.
spider
Okay.
mite,
Yeah, yeah.
and it has very long. I can't remember the Latin name for it, but it has very long appendages, and it seeks out thripes in the dirt and eats them.
Super. So at this point, what we're looking at is we're going really much deeper into detail. We're not just focused on inclusions. Well, we are, but we are trying to get characteristics. And so I'm going to go into some of the microscope photos. And John, maybe you can describe what we're seeing here and what that inclusion tells us about this specimen.
This is a barite crystal in the center. The barite crystal's in the center, and it was forming a sort of a cross pattern, and then a primary solution of opal deposited on it to give it that form, and then later on, more opal came in and captured the whole thing as an inclusion. But it's visible even though it's opal and opal, it's visible because the texturing on the inclusion itself creates an interface that allows the inclusion to be seen. But it's primarily barite with opal on it.
Now, when the opal coats it like that, it retards or stops the growth of the barite. Is that correct?
Yes,
So, what is it? It cuts it off from any of the fluid nutrients needed to expand the size of the crystal. Is that, am I
yes, that's exactly
okay?
what happens. Or at least that's what the theory is.
So, in this case, it's not too dissimilar from the amber example that we saw in the previous photograph.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, now this is, I'm guessing this is quartz, but go ahead and tell me what we're looking at.
Yes, the host is quartz and the inclusion is trifolite. It's a phosphate and pegmatitic phosphate, and shows a color change actually from a kind of a green to a sort of a plum red. And this colored area you see on here, that's the interface. It's like an oil slick on water. It creates an interface that's very thin, and it creates the iridescent colors.
What does this tell us about um, the growth area or the locale? What kind of clues can we suss out from seeing something an inclusion like this?
Well, if you see an inclusion like this, even though you're dealing with a cut stone, you can say that you had a host rock that was a pegmatite, a
Okay.
complex pegmatite.
And do some of these allow us to better identify localities?
Yeah, some of them do, but not that
Okay.
many. We're still working on that part. That's a part of the puzzle we're still working on, is trying to determine where something came from, a particular mine or particular mining area. This one just
And
happens to come from Brazil.
okay, so and John, a lot of times with minerals, um, we have to do analyses to figure out what the mineral is. If we're looking at something like this, how do you ID the inclusion without having access to it?
Right, I
I'm
know
not
what
sure
you
if I'm
mean.
articulating a proper question.
Without having to be able to put your hands on it or your equipment on it.
Right.
Well, um, we have an instrument that's called a laser Raman microspectrometer,
Okay.
or Raman instrument,
Right.
and that can see down in a reasonable distance, a couple millimeters in certain cases, below the surface, and uh, it gives you a spectrum for the inclusion that you're analyzing, and this can be searched through the database of Raman spectra, and a identification can be made in that way.
Right.
Before
But do you have
that,
to filter out the host a mineral?
once in a while you do, but not
Okay.
very often. Actually, it sometimes will give you a real clean spectrum,
Wow.
and that has saved a lot of pieces, because in the past, what you do if you were really curious about this is you would grind down to it and bring it out of the, expose it at the surface so you could analyze it. But
Sure. Exactly.
then you have a ruined specimen. So but with the Raman instrument, you save the specimen and the inclusion, and still get the identification information that you were after.
Super. Yeah. Okay. So we're familiar with the Raman. We had Bob Downs on, who helped develop the rough database that they use for ID, but I didn't know it could go through one material to identify an inclusion. So thank you for adding that piece to my knowledge base here.
Sure.
All right. So we've got a bubble inside of a a bird profile.
Yeah, that's in a beryl crystal.
Okay.
That's beryl, and you're right. That's a vapor bubble, and then this is the fluid around it. And down in here, you have crushed up feldspar. Don't know what these are. I think that they might be a tantalite or something, these little whiskers. But then this is a quartz crystal sitting up here, and
Okay.
that's shot in polarized light.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
And you could run Raman on this and get the information, feldspars and quartz and stuff. But this thing was not. I was never able to do it. I don't think. I, I don't know who
Now,
would be able to do that little thing.
here's a bit of an odd question. Are they able to sample the air inside of a bubble like this to see what gas percentage it contains to possibly identify when it might have formed in the evolution of the planet?
Yeah, you can use different techniques. Most of them are destructive, but Raman can sometimes give you, like, carbon dioxide or something like that. Can sometimes give you a little hint at what the different phases might be. This bubble is pretty stable. It doesn't, if you warm it up, it doesn't change, it doesn't get smaller, and if you cool it down, it doesn't really get bigger. So it's probably a oxygen and nitrogen bubble, and this material around it, the fluid, is probably an aqueous solution.
Interesting. John, I'm going to ask Raquel to throw up the poll, the quick fire 5 questions, and if you want to just minimize that, we'll continue our talk on inclusions.
Yep.
So
We got to get to Nathan here. I want Nathan introduced.
Yeah. We got Nathan coming up. He's just a few photos away. But
Okay.
first, we're going to go to this shot, which looks like a scene from the video game Asteroids. What are we looking at?
This is in a morganite or morganite barrel, kind of a peachy colored barrel. And this is pyrochlor, mineral pyrochlor. It's anyway, it's a pyrochlor group mineral. And this is lepidolite mica. The pink material is a lepidolite mica. And these things were grew on and were implanted on the surface of the barrel. And then the barrel continued to grow and envelop these. And these are little dislocation trails coming off that look like a tails of a comet or something.
Dislocation trails. What does that mean? That it was pushed along the surface?
Or? Yeah, it was pushed along and left these, and the host material continued to grow and just left these tails behind it as it went. So you can sit there and think that this one was up here at one time and then just kind of went down. And the same thing with this one. It was up and went down. And so they're growth blockages in a way. These things block the growth of the host barrel, which created dislocation trails. And dislocations.
So those trails, are they scrapes of the inclusion material, or are they just some kind of aberration of the barrel that grew around it?
Yeah, they're just a product of the barrel actually that was growing around it.
Interesting.
And pushing it along. And so this is in a cut stone. It's actually quite an attractive piece. And it's about, I don't know, 35 or 36 carats, the host material is. But I just like the two different ones, and the colors and so forth in there, and the textures, the different textures. Because this one's an octahedron here, and this one is very micaceous looking.
Yes, indeed. All right, I'm going to jump to the next photograph here.
That's a hydrogen cloud. The yellow is a hydrogen cloud in diamond. Now, without polarized light, not polarized light, but without UV illumination, this is white. But when you put ultraviolet light on it, it turns bright yellow and glows. And it's a hydrogen cloud inside of the diamond. It actually has a kind of a octahedral shape if you look at it from the side, but it looks like a cube in this direction.
That is superb.
And that's in a diamond, so the diamond is surrounding it. And
that's wonderful. All right, I'm going to jump to the next photograph here. It looks like a landscape of a bunch of volcanoes.
This is a what's called a landscape agate, and it's from Brazil. And this one won actually the Nikon Small World competition one year. It was the grand prize winner. And they were really surprised because they offered a big cash reward. And I told them I wanted a microscope. I didn't want the cash reward. So they actually gave me the microscope that I wanted and all the equipment with it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Because
so
they were
back in 1984.
They were so surprised that somebody would want the equipment as opposed to the money.
I would imagine they were thrilled.
Yeah. So anyway, I got a nice microscope out of the deal. And it worked out really well. But this is all goethite and hematite causing this scene here.
Okay. John, I'm going to pull up, I think, your wife's favorite inclusion here.
Yeah, that's my wife's pendant, her necklace. And this was actually done by Baron Moonsteiner, did this piece.
Yeah, out of Idar Oberstein.
Right. He did this piece. He made the frame and mounted it and so forth. And she wears this every place. This thing, it's very sturdy, and it is a conversation piece. But what happened is there was a pocket, and ilmenite and hematite started growing. First the hematite was growing, and then ilmenite. Then titanium oxide came in. You had iron titanium oxide, which is ilmenite, and then the iron ran out, and all you were left with was titanium oxide, which is the rutile. So you had iron oxide, iron titanium oxide, and then titanium oxide. And that's what it was, the sequence of growth steps that produced this. And then at the very last, quartz came in and surrounded it, because otherwise this would fall apart. It was so fibrous.
Yeah, exactly. It's absolutely beautiful. I can imagine her wearing it. And the fact that it's a Munsteiner piece just speaks volumes about it. Now, John, I want to do a shout out to someone without whose help we probably couldn't do this interview. It's your friend Renfo. And you and Nathan met in 2008, and you've maintained, obviously, a tight relationship ever since.
Yeah.
What I find really interesting is in 2010, you and Nathan started to present inclusion study classes at the GIA 34 years after you started working there. So that to me is a major step forward. I want you to tell us a little bit about Nathan and how you guys work together, and let us know Nathan a little bit better.
Well, Nathan's a kind of a story. I thought he didn't have any personality at all when I first met him. But
I'm not sure I do.
He says he's still not sure if he does. But anyway, what happened was, when new people would come into the laboratory and would start work, I would sit there and take a nice inclusion piece out and show it to them and see how they reacted to it. And the usual reaction was they'd hold it in their hands and they'd turn it a little bit and say, "That looks really interesting. That's pretty," and then hand it back to me. And that's where it went. Nathan, when he was new and I took it out to him, he said that he wanted to look at it. He said he had a lot of work to do, but he asked me if I could leave it with him because he really wanted to study it. And so I left it with him. And he came back at the end of the day with a little report on it that he'd written out of what kinds of things he was seeing and what it was. And he had a lot of questions about it. So I knew that he was interested, as opposed to just, being superficially interested. He was genuinely interested in it. And so that sort of started off with a friendship right there. And we've just grown to be really close. And he likes to say that I'm his mentor, but I just think of him as a friend, and a good friend. And we've gotten close to him, with him and his family, his kids, and so forth. And it's been a really good. There he is.
There's Nathan. How's it?
and he's the one who got this set up for me, and
well, John, I think you are very humble, and I think that is part of what makes you a great mentor. And Nathan, tell me if you agree with that.
I agree entirely. And when I needed a diamond to propose to my wife, John gave me one with a garnet inside. So John's been a big part of my story too. And the microscope that Nikon gave him is now my microscope, and he put about 30 or so plus years on it, and hopefully I'll put another 30 or so years on it.
I love it. You are carrying the torch. Well done, my friend. That is super. John, I'm going to jump forward to, or maybe jump back, if you will, to 2019. And in 2019, the International Mineralogical Association approved the name of a new mineral, John Koivula. Tell us about this.
Well, it was a small specimen was found in Myanmar by a local gemologist, and he had no idea what it was. So he took it to the GIA laboratory in Bangkok, and they couldn't figure out what it was. So it came here to Carlsbad, to the research department, and bunch of people looked at it. I wasn't involved in it, but a bunch of people looked at it, and they did their testing on it. And Nathan was one of the ones who did the testing, but it was primarily Aaron Paul that did that spearheaded the identification of it. But it turned out to be a new mineral, and so it was named after me. That they honored me with the naming of it as a new mineral. And it has really extreme pleochroism. It goes from essentially colorless to a really rich purplish blue color, and violet, like a violet color right there. And the pleochroism is really out there. It's just an interesting mineral. We don't have enough of it to really. Let's put it this way: there's only 2 known pieces, and the likelihood that more will be found is questionable. There might be some of it out there right now that people don't know about, that they have in their collections, that they are curious about, but it's a what's the chemical formula for it? It's cesium, beryllium, boron, magnesium silicate, and it's the 7th member of the beryl family, so it's in the beryl group.
Beautiful. And John, I don't think we could have ended on a better photograph than this blue John Koivulite, since when you started collecting, it was blue minerals that first caught your eyes. So
yeah,
well done. Congratulations. It's well deserved. I want to get to the Quickfire 5 segment of our program so that we can fast track into the Q&A, because we are 5 minutes past the hour. And I know that in about 20 minutes from now, Raquel's going to turn into a pumpkin. So, John, I've got 5 questions here. Each question has 2 answers. You tell me which answer you resonate with most strongly. All of the viewers have answered already. They are trying to guess what your correct answer is, and we'll see how well everybody knows you. Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay. Question number 1, preferred drink, beer or wine?
Beer.
Beer. Question number 2, the most important gemstone, emerald or diamond?
Well, I like diamond myself, because it comes from a place that we can't get to, and it is the only material that comes from the deep earth that contains the signature minerals that typify things like peridiotites and eclogites.
Okay, then we're going with diamond. Your favorite dry martini or dry ice?
Dry ice.
Dry ice. Best fuzzy, Pomeranian or a bunny?
Bunny.
Bunny. And final question, camera of choice, Canon or Nikon?
Nikon.
Nikon. All right. Raquel, do we have the answers that the viewers have provided us for John Koivula's Quickfire 5 questions?
We do. It was really interesting seeing John's face to know the answer. There was no doubt. It was so dry eyes.
Yeah, exactly. There was no doubt at all. Okay. Question number 1 was preferred drink, beer or wine? John predictably said beer. What did our viewers say?
Beer.
Beer. Good job. Most important gemstone, emerald or diamond? John went with diamond. What did our viewers say?
Interesting, emerald.
Emerald. Wow. Okay. Well, for those of you who are interested, John published a book called The Micro World of Diamonds. It's a fantastic book filled with inclusion photographs in diamonds. And that is available, as are the photo atlases, at the GIA bookstore. You can go to gia.edu. I think this one, they're out of stock right now, but you can query them, and I'm sure they'll get more of those soon. Question number 3, favorite dry martini or dry ice? John went with dry ice. What did the viewers say?
Dry ice.
Dry ice. They know. John, explain to everyone real quickly why dry ice is your favorite dry.
Because I remember as a kid how fascinating it was when a teacher of mine made a what the heck did they call them? I can't remember what they call them now. It's where you put the dry ice in and you put a cloth over it, and then you put alcohol on it, and you put a radioactive specimen in the middle of it, and it shows the alpha particles coming off.
Uh-huh.
Cloud chamber.
Holy cow. We went to totally different schools, because I just had like a volcano-shaped dry ice water, and the the gas would come out. But you
I remember how fascinating that was, seeing the alpha particles.
I love that. Okay. Best fuzzy. The choice was Pomeranian or bunny. Without hesitation, you went for bunny. What did our viewers say, Raquel?
Pomeranian.
John, tell us about your bunny here and what you're doing.
Well, that was a little bunny by the name of Max, and he was a Easter reject. Somebody got him for their kid as a little tiny. Actually, there was 2 of them, Max and Clyde, but somebody got him for Easter. And when they found out that it pooped and needed food and all the rest of this kind of stuff, they didn't want it anymore. So they put it out on the street. Oh. And we rescued it at the shelter. And Christy and I took Max and Clyde home with us and took them to a place called Bunny Fest, which is an annual celebration. And we got them adopted. So they had new forever homes by bunny savvy people. So that was what that was about. That was Max.
Long live Max.
Yep.
All right. Our final question was camera of choice, Canon or Nikon. John immediately went to Nikon. Raquel, what did our viewers say?
We have a very good audience, so they were good listeners. Nikon.
So that's 3 out of 5. And John, by the way, are you aware that Canon has just been dethroned as the king of astrophotography? Nikon has taken its place. Nikon and Sony has taken its place.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that is recent news.
And here.
Shoot, Brian, sorry, I think I mute you by mistake. I promise it was by mistake.
Oh, Raquel, I don't think it was by mistake.
I promise. I was just playing with the screen. I need to say that.
Raquel, let's go to the Q&A. What do our readers want to know from John?
Where to start? There are so many questions. Let me see if I can put them together by, I guess.
I can't answer them, Nathan can.
Yeah, so by Barbara, what's the most unique inclusion you ever saw?
Most unique inclusion I ever saw. Yeah, Marylanite. Nathan said Marylanite would be up there, and that was a weird looking inclusion. But I think the most unique inclusion I've ever seen is a aquamarine crystal that I have that's probably about 3 inches long, and it has a big cavity in it with a big bubble that floats back and forth in the cavity. But also in the cavity with the bubble, there are hundreds of little pyrite cubes in the barrel, and as you tilt it back and forth, the pyrite sort of dribbles around in there and tumbles about. And I think that's the most craziest inclusion I ever saw.
Wow. So the pyrites will also move?
Yes,
Wow.
they tumble
That's
like
very
little dice.
unusual.
We have seen the bubble. So there is another question along those lines. Is do some of the inclusions just drop into the outer mineral when it is in a liquid state?
They drop onto growing faces. They'll drop onto the surface of the host material, the future host material, and they stick there, get trapped, and then get covered up.
Very good. Another question from Barbara. What are your thoughts about helical growth inclusions in aquamarine?
Oh, the corkscrews. Actually, I was lucky. I've been really lucky on that because John White was getting rid of his collections. And he offered me his spiral collection. He had quite a few really interesting spirals and spodumene and topaz and beryl, but I think that there are dislocations that are decorated, and then they are more susceptible to etching, and etching fluids will go down in there and carve them out, and they get filled with stuff like clay and feldspar and just different chunks of things, very fine material. So the filling of them is epigenetic, but the formation is a growth phenomenon.
That's very cool. Moving into testing, have you used Confoca Raman to identify the inclusions?
No.
Just use the Raman without going really...
Right.
Okay. How do you identify inclusions if they do not have a definite form?
If they don't have a definite form, if they're rounded out, you can try to use the Raman on them, and that will help. But other than that, it's just experience. It really is. The more things you look at, a microscope doesn't give you any readout answers. It doesn't sit there and when you put something under it and say you're looking at this or that. With the more experience you have, the more things you've looked at, the better your ability to do site identifications is. And you can generally narrow something down. Is it transparent? Is it opaque? Is it translucent? Is it green? Is it yellow? Is it blue? Is it colorless? You answer all of these questions, and some minerals will start dropping out, and other ones will still be in the possibility, and you come up with a possibility or two, and then you try to analyze it if you have to. But I generally now, at this point in my life, I try to avoid destructive testing. Once in a while, I'll still do it. I'll still break something out, but usually I don't.
Makes sense. Oops, Brian, I think that's my alarm.
Was that your alarm?
Yeah.
Oh, hey.
A couple of minutes earlier.
All right. Yeah. So for those who hear the screeching going on, that's the nationwide emergency test that FEMA and FCC are doing throughout America. So a bunch of American phones just went. Whap! So
yeah, well, ours
it's over now.
Here too.
That should be it. Did you hear that, John?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nathan's phone went off.
Yeah.
And a few more questions if we have time. How do you measure field of view while taking the microphotographs?
We have built into the microscope, there's a software program that allows us to measure. We set a spot on one part and then set a spot on the other part, and it tells us based on the magnification and so forth, it tells us how big the the entire field of view is and how big we can measure an inclusion, for instance, and see how large that is. So it's a software thing that we use.
Very good. Vivian is interesting about the hydrogen inclusion you showed us before. How does the hydrogen cloud in the diamond assume the shape of the octahedral crystal? Does it fill an octahedral void in the host diamond?
It's not a void, it's a phantom. It forms it's just like a phantom crystal, and it reacts very strongly. You can actually see it holding it in your hand. You can see this little yellow spot in the diamond.
That's impressive. Let me go. What is the best affordable microscope in your opinion?
Boy, you want to get the best optics you can afford. You can sometimes get really good optics off of the internet as a used microscope. And if you know what you're doing and you can buy very, very good optics. Nathan bought a Zeiss research microscope for how much was it? $1,300. Wow. And it was, when it was new, it was $70,000, about $76,000. And he got it for $1,300, completely rebuilt the thing, repainted it, did everything on it, and it works just like a new microscope. So the used market is a good place to go if you know what you're doing. But other than that, you just buy the best optics you can with the money you have. There's no substitute for good optics.
Very good. Thank you. Going now back to inclusions, the one in the OPA, what were the round circular inclusions on the corners of the growing varite?
Those are opal.
I see. Okay, so that was the OPA.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
And that's in a Mexican opal.
Very good. So there is a couple more questions. One is, do you need any prerequisite to study GIA, to study a GIA or take courses at GIA?
No, you can take them either as correspondence courses, or I guess they call them distant vision or distant education now. And you can also take them in residence here at the school. A high school diploma is all that's required.
Very good. Do you really need dark field illumination if only camera is and not an eyepiece or microscope?
Dark field, do you need dark field illumination? Yeah. The more types of lighting you have, the better your photographs are going to be. There's times when dark field is what you need. There's times when fiber optic light is what you need. There's times when transmitted light or bright field is what you need. It just depends. Ultraviolet light, these little ultraviolet pins are great for that. There's little pens that you push the button and you got a nice strong ultraviolet light coming out. That's the way that yellow phantom in the diamond was photographed, was with a little UV light.
Okay, so two more questions. One is from Bear Williams. Would you choose a lion head or a mini Rex?
I'd probably take the lion head, but I love them both.
And then the last question is by myself, because I'm fascinated to hear that you have such a good collection of inclusion. So do you have any thoughts about the future of your collection?
Well, that's a problem. My daughter and her two children aren't the least bit interested really in maintaining it. I have actually a collection of about somewhere near 26 or 2,600 cataloged specimens. I put them on a database. And I also have about 1,200 or 1,300 thumbnail minerals.
Okay.
And so I've got these collections that are all in a database, searchable databases, and I don't know what to do with them.
Donate. Donate.
Donate. I can't afford to donate them. I'm not that well heeled. I don't know what
institution on the East Coast that might
No,
accept
but
such a donation.
Taking Brian jokes aside, I think it's really good that at least you have it all organized.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
I think if I put my museum curator hat, we worry about such an important collection and what could be the future, especially when some people don't really take care of the collections. But it seems like you have it all organized, and I'm sure, I mean, in my mind, the ideal place would be GIA. If that's something that, Nathan would be thrilled to have your collection in perpetuity in there. So it's something that would be GIA could purchase. So I don't know. And I love the other part of is the legacy, is keeping the collection together. So if you can start thinking about who would be interesting, and of course you have to make some money. I'm giving you the whole talking here, but making money, of course, that will be idea. So
I'd like to see it continue to be added to. In other words, wherever it goes, people would sit there and put new inclusions into it, so it becomes even bigger repository of information.
Amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much. That's all from us, from me.
Well, John,
thank you.
That is an incredible collection that you must have. I dare say it is one of the most unique collections in the world. So I think it would behoove the entire community for somehow that collection to stay together and end up in a museum somewhere where, as you said, it would be added to. John, we got to go because I know Raquel's on her way out. So thank you again so much for coming on the show, for taking time out of your busy schedule. Nathan, thank you for helping out. And for all of you viewers out there, thank you for tuning in. Tune in again next month, and we're going to have another exciting episode of Mineral Talks Live. Aloha.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you, Raquel.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nathan. On the corner, show up, say bye. There you go. Nathan and I have been together in few of the Sinkangas